Hi, welcome back. This is Donna with ABC Cake Decorating Baking Supplies. The next stop on our cake journey is lesson 18. We are going to be learning how to make a ribbon rose and a petal rose. These are one of the most sought after flowers every cake decorator wants to learn how to make. Not so much the ribbon rose, but the petal rose. But we are going to start out doing the ribbon rose and then we'll advance to the petaled rose. What you're going to need to make these are, you're going to need your stiff icing. You are going to need 2 bags. You will want 1 bag with tip 12, which is our plain tip. And you are also going to want a bag that has the 104 tip in it. With these bags, I did do the striping technique. Because the petal tip or the 104 tip, it's larger on one end than the other. When you stripe it, you need to make sure that the skinny end is up with the stripe. And if it's not, just simply loosen up your coupler a little bit and whoop, loosen it up a little. Loosen it, loosen. Don't tighten it, loosen. Righty tighty, lefty loosey. Loosen it and turn it to where the small is lined up with your line, your stripe, and then you can go ahead and you can tighten it up. You may need to hold your tip so it doesn't turn. And make sure, if this stripe is anywhere else, you are not going to be able to get the stripe on the top of your flower because this is the part that's going to be up to see. You want 2 of them, a tip 12 and a tip 104 in 2 separate bags, because when you start piping, you're not going to want to have to put down your flower, change the tip, and then go back to it. So this is going to save you a lot of frustration and just extra hand work that's not necessary. Also, we'll need your flower nail, always your flower nail. And remember, if you're right-handed, you hold it in your left hand, and you're going to turn it towards your fingertips. Always in the crease, towards your fingertips. If you're left-handed, you're going to put it in your right hand, and again, now you're going to go clockwise. Way to remember, if you're right-handed, counterclockwise. If you're left-handed, it's clockwise. You're always going towards your fingertips because the nail is going away from you and the icing's coming towards you. Also, wax paper squares. That way there, like on these, as you pipe them, you can take them down, set them, and if you're ready to put them on the cake, we can put them in the freezer, and then we can take them out and apply them on the cake, and I'll show you that when we put all the cake together, okay? So, we've got everything, and we're ready to go. So let's bring up some roses. First thing we want to do is we want to go ahead and be able to attach this wax paper to our nail, but we also want it to be able to come off the nail. So we're going to use our icing. So just a little dollop of icing and then our wax paper. Not too difficult. Now the thing we want to do is we want to make an icing cone. And what I'll do is I'll show you a couple times, because one of the things you want to do is make sure that the cone isn't too tall and not too short. If it's too tall, your flower's going to fall over. If it's too short, you may not have enough room to make a flower as large as you want. We're going to start out with our base. Our bag's going to be at 90 degrees. It's going to be straight up and down, and that's why I like parchment paper, so I can kind of wet my hand. You always want to make sure your tip is nice and clean. Straight up and down. We're going to go to about the size of a nickel. We're going to squeeze. As we squeeze, we're just going to let it build up around, and then when it's about nickel size, we're gradually going to bring it up. Then we're going to stop and pull away. If you're not sure if it's too tall or too short, what you can do is take your 104 tip, and it should be about 1.5 times that height. So if you have it this way, you have 1, and then if you bring it up, you have about 1/2. So you kind of eyeball it there and here. If it's up a little bit or down a little bit, that's okay. This is just kind of a guide so you know. Now I'm going to do it one more time because the base of this rose is very, very important. And actually that base is what's going to be used for either rose. So it's all going to start that way. So again, I'll take my wax paper square. I have enough icing on there now. Just going to apply it. Straight up and down. Make sure you have a nice tight grip on it. Now the ribbon rose, both roses should have stiff icing, but the ribbon rose, if the icing is a little softer, it's okay because it's not carrying all the petals. You will find though, again, like I've repeated before, the heat of your hand is going to change the consistency of your icing. So you may need to take it, either put it in the refrigerator to cool it off a little bit, or get a brand new bag and start out with some more icing because this one's warm. Again, we're going to start out about nickel size. Once it's there, we're gradually going to bring it up slowly, keeping constant pressure on that. Stop and pull away. Again, this one here is just a little bit higher. That's okay. It's good enough. I want to show you a couple don'ts. They usually say, don't teach your nose, but just so you can see. If you make a base and it looks, whoop, that would be a no. And it looks like this, that is wrong. You do not have enough bottom to this for it to hold all the weight of that petal, and it's kind of ice cream cone, so you don't have that nice even cone. Then you also don't want anything like that. It's not going to work, and you'll be surprised. A lot of people will try to make a rose base out of something that's really just, it's not going to work. So now let's go ahead and get started with our ribbon rose. First thing we want to do, I want to make sure my paper stays. Make sure your tip is nice and clean, straight up and down. We're going to go out to about a nickel and then gradually come up. And eventually you'll kind of know about what 1.5 times your 104 tip is. And that's just about it. If you have that little guy on top, you can just kind of knock him over. It's okay. The next part of this is where it's probably the most difficult part of the whole rose. And what that is that's going to be making the middle. It's going to be making the bud. To make the bud, what we're going to do, and this is where, if you're going to do anything, keep practicing this over and over again. We have the fat side of our tip and the skinny side up. Whenever you're making these kind of roses, you always want the fat side down, skinny part up. We are going to look at this kind of like a clock. We're going to start out at 11 o'clock. And that's going to be where we're going to start this little wrap. So if we're thinking of 11 o'clock, I'm going to turn my back to you just so you can see where this skinny part is? This skinny part, if there's a clock, it's aiming towards 11 o'clock. If you're left-handed, you're going to turn it to 1 o'clock. So you're just going to kind of have it at a little bit of an angle. Here we are. The fat part, don't be afraid. You can actually just stick it right into your base. When you start the bud, you want to be as close to the base as possible. You don't want to have to see any light through there. And also, if you start piping out this way, your icing's not going to know where to go because you're not giving it a direction. So, 11 o'clock, right-handers, 1 o'clock, left-handers, and you have it in the other hand. Fat side always down. If you find out that your petals, and I'll show you this right here. If you go this way, you have a fat stripe. If you go this way, see how skinny that is? So your flower will have a fatter petal on top and a skinny one on the bottom, where it should actually be skinny on top and fat on the bottom. So always self-check yourself on that. Make sure you're proper positioning. What I do is I always use support, so I always take my elbow and put it against my side, and I pretty much keep it there. I'm gonna have it right about my shoulder, like if I'm getting ready to throw a pass, or somebody laughs at you and you want to throw icing at them. And then the little end is at 11 o'clock. So this should be your proper positioning to make the rose. Now, the only thing that's going to move, basically, is my rose nail. And it's going to go towards my fingertip, whether I'm right or left-handed, towards my finger. This is just going to go up as we're turning and come down. That is the whole motion that we're going to be doing. We're not going to take our hands and start going like this because now your positioning is completely wrong. Very, very important. If anything you learn from this, practice this proper positioning, and then the rest of the rose is going to come very easy. Let's make one. Halfway in, we got the fat part touching into our mound, the skinny part up, and it's at 11 o'clock for the right-handers. We're going to make sure that this is correct, that it's right here, so that we can twist it. Okay, so we're going up, turn, 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 and come down. And that's our little tight ribbon. It's simple. The problem is people make it more confusing than it really is, and it's not. If you saw my positioning, 11 o'clock, and this was into the mound, we squeeze, lift up, turn, turn, turn as we're squeezing, and come down. Biggest thing is we just want to cover this very top right here. That's our whole goal, is just to make it look like it's a rosebud. Okay, we'll do one more of those, and then we'll start with our basic petal. So, put a little bit of icing on here. Put our paper on there. Straight up and down to what size? About a nickel size. And then once the nickel size is there, we're gradually going to come up, stop, and pull away. And it should be about how tall? About 1.5 of these tip 104s, or whatever size tip you're using to make your rose. But a rule of thumb, 1.5 times size that tip, okay? 11 o'clock skin in. This is going to go into our mound, and it's right over our shoulder. Remember, we're going to go towards our fingertip. Clean your tip, squeeze, lift. As we're squeezing, turn, 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 turn. When you get it all the way around, stop and bring it down. Okay. Now, if it's kind of a little crooked, you can always pull it, but then you can also use your icing to bring it back straight. When I told you, kind of think of a clock, well, we started at 11 o'clock. Now our very next petal is going to be straight up and down. What we're going to do is kind of angle each petal so that they're not straight up and down. So it kind of looks like your flower starting to open. This is the easiest part. You can do that. You've already completed a rose. That's the hardest part. Okay. So now, straight up and down, skinny end up, fat end down. Remember your proper positioning. Now, instead of turning it this way, we're going to keep it straight. We're going to go right where the base of our petal was, because we want the top of our tip to be about the same height as what our bud is. Nice and close to the mound. We're going to squeeze and turn, turn, turn as we're squeezing. See? Very simple. All we did was keep it straight up and down, squeeze, and turn. The next one, it's very simple, but again, you have to keep note of your proper positioning. So we went from 11 o'clock to noon. Now we're going to go to 1 o'clock for right-handers, and we're going to go 11 o'clock for left-handers. This is where, I'll set this down a second. This is where some of the problems come in. You will have proper positioning, and then when you turn it to 1 o'clock, as you're turning the nail, a lot of people will take their wrist and turn their wrist. So now they're straight up and down, so they lost that position. So if you're used to keeping your wrist straight up and down, just turn this in your hand and just keep it right there. Don't twist your wrist at all, or you're going to change your positioning. The second row of petals, so we're at 1 o'clock. As you can see, there's a seam right here. We don't want to start there because we don't want our flowers to have a seam. So we're going to kind of divide this flower into thirds because we're putting 3 rows of petals on there. So if we come right here, now remember your positioning, just a little out, and you can go just right at the base of where that line is because it's all going to pretty much be the same size. And what we're going to do is squeeze, and we're going to turn. And you can see now that that one's out just a little bit more than the first one was. Now for the third row, what we're going to do is we are going to go to 2 o'clock. Same thing again. Once you have it in position, don't twist your wrist, okay? Again, we don't want to start where the seam is, so we want to come over here just a little bit, and we're going to keep the same positioning, squeeze, and there's your completed rose. Now if you want to make it larger, you can go in and add more petals. Just make sure as you do it, you just kind of go out just a little bit and make sure that you don't have it in a straight line. And then you take this and you set it down. And then once you've had all your tray, go ahead and put them in the freezer, let them get cold, and then we'll put them on our cake when we're done. Okay, now we're going to get ready to go to the petal flower. Just like with the ribbon rose, now we're going to go to the petal rose. The basics of the rose are going to be the same as far as making the cone and doing that little wrap. The difference is that the petal rose has 3 rows of petals, but the first one was going to start out with 3, then we're going to go to 5, and then we're going to go to 7 petals. Once you made 1 petal, all of the other ones are going to be identical. It's just how we're going to apply them to our cone. This is where you need to make sure that your icing is stiff. If it's not stiff or if it's warm out, you can kind of see my poor little flower. It's kind of wilting because of the buttercream and the shortening in it, and from the lights, it is starting to melt. What I have here is some fresh icing that is stiff, and you're going to see the difference immediately once I'm done. So if you see your flower looking like that and you're going, I just don't understand why my flower's not standing up, it's because your icing is just not stiff enough. However, if your icing is too stiff and you can't squeeze it out, then don't make them that stiff. Make them what is the most comfortable for your hand. What we're going to do, tip 12, just like before. Little bit of icing there, our square. Now we're going to make our cone. Remember, straight up and down, about the size of a nickel and about 1.5 times the height of our 104 tip. Straight up and down, squeeze. Bring it up slowly, stop, and pull away. There's our base, just like the ribbon rose. Next one, just like the ribbon rose. We're going to start out, right-handers, we're going to start out at 11. Left-handers, we're going to start out at 1. Also want to make sure fat part's down, skinny part's up. If you striped your bag, you want to make sure that the skinny part is lined up with your bag stripe. Proper positioning. Take your fat part, stick it right into your base. 11 o'clock angle. Squeeze, up, and turn, and down. So now we've got our nice tight wrap. Just exactly the same way. Like I say, this is where the technique of starting to build that rose, that's the hardest part. Squeeze, turn, turn, turn up, turn, turn, turn down. Once you've got that wrap around there, that's all that matters. Now to make the petal, what we're going to do is we're going to kind of do a rainbow motion. All we're going to do is boop, boop, boop. It's basically just a bow is all it is. We're straight up and down now, just like with our ribbon rose. Remember our very first was at 12 o'clock? Exactly the same. But now we're going to take this and we're going to divide it into thirds. So we're going to make 3 individual petals, okay? Straight up and down. We're going to go right at the base, just like the ribbon rose. But what we're going to do here, remember proper positioning. We're going to squeeze. As we squeeze, we're going to lift up just a little bit and come down. So see, you just kind of basically make like a little arch. Now what we want to do is we want to come in and we, just like on our ribbon rose, we don't want to have a solid line. So we're now going to come in and kind of overlap. So we're going to start over here instead of starting right where we finished. Still the same positioning. We're going to overlap right here, squeeze, come up just a little bit, and bring it down. So now you've got the same bow. You've got the bow here, you've got the bow here. Now we're going to bring the petals together. So we're going to overlap here, come over and overlap there. Same positioning because we're still on the same row. The only difference between the petal rose and this one, that was 1 solid for the first row. There's 3 here for the first row. Make sure you clean your tip if it's dirty. Overlap, fat end down, skinny end up, and we're straight up and down because this is exact same flower. Now that is what you would call your bud. If you were done with it, you could come in and you could take it with some flower lifters and you could chop it off and you could put it down and you'd have your small rose. That would be your small rose. To go to your medium rose, just like the second row here, this one's going to be 5. We're going to make 5 petals. So now we're going to divide the next row into 5. We are going to now go from 12 to 1 o'clock. If you're a left-hander, you're going to 11 o'clock. We need to fit 5 leaves or 5 petals in there. And again, you want proper positioning. You want to make sure you overlap each petal so that they don't have that line coming in there. I'm going to start right here, fat end in, out just a little bit, squeeze, come up and come down. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's my 5 petals. And you can see they're kind of going out and they're overlapping. All we're doing is that one same motion. It's just up and down. Doesn't matter which angle you're at as long as you're just basically giving it just a little bit of a curve, as you can see right there. That's the easiest part of the whole thing. The hardest part is the middle. Now we've got our medium-sized rose. Now we want to go to 7 petals, and that's why I say you need to have that stiff icing to make that cone, because if you don't, your petal, it's just not, it's going to timber. You're going to have a wilted flower. So let's go to the next one. So what do? We're going to go to 2 o'clock or 10 o'clock, depending on if you're right or left-handed. On the bottom, always overlap. Proper positioning, fat end down, skinny end up. We go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then right here is where number 7 is going to go. And then if you need to, you can come back by. And there's your completed rose. Now you can see how much more this one's standing up compared to the other one, and that's because of the stiffer icing. My petals are standing up more where these are kind of just starting to melt. That completes our petal rose, and now you know how to do a ribbon rose also. One of the things you need to remember is consistency and body positioning in making these roses. Also, in the very next lesson, we are going to be learning my favorite flower, the carnation. We are going to take all these flowers and apply it to our cake, so you'll have a nice little garden theme, summer, fall basket, depending upon the colors that you want to make. You can make your own your own corsage. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions or suggestions, please contact me, Donna, at rvideo.com, or contact the store. Thank you for watching.